let's not go hot into the episode. Let's give it a couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for coming, by the way. That's where I should probably start it.
No worries.
It was actually super interesting looking at your data because I haven't done that for like half a year to take a look into someone's data, and I definitely never. Okay, I once looked at someone who had 83% win rate,
Sure.
but that was in Cube and in the best of three, and it
Got
was
it.
Jean-Emmanuel Depras. So
Yeah. Well, he
that would
also
be the
just
truth.
does things nobody else does, and he always wins. So
Yeah, exactly. There was no point. So
Yeah. Okay.
but last person I had was I don't know if you know Pasta Pirate.
I do not. I'm
He's
assuming they're good. So
no, that's
Oh.
quite. He's famous for having the 47% win rate,
Oh,
but plays like
a lot.
that format. I had 300 drafts.
Yeah.
You have 82 right now.
Yeah.
That's the kind of volume I was looking at. And the most impressive thing about those 300 drafts is that 190 of them were in the same color pair.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that
How do
was a
you-
person who
yeah.
was forcing absolutely hardcore. So that was a very different data. But before
Got
that, I had
it.
Sam Black, I had Corticals.
Okay.
So Numot was also
Yeah.
fun.
I've never looked at any of those stats, so it'll be fun to see what comes out of this.
Well, it's great that even if you don't look at the stats, you actually record them and share them. So that's nice. I mean, of course,
Right.
those ones are not available to the average person, but
Yeah, that's true.
17 Lands assumes that I had your permission to look into this.
You know, I thought I had those recording for MKM, but I guess I just had the wrong setting, so it really just started with OTJ. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I honestly say that the fact that someone managed to have higher win rate than Ekan is impressive. I didn't think I will live to the day where someone will actually have across such a volume a higher win rate than Ekan, because in 10 drafts you can have it.
Of course, yeah. Ekin is a master and very, very tough to beat.
Yeah, I don't know.
Impossible, actually, I think, for me at least. But.
You know, there was this Philip K. Dick had this theory that Stanislav Lem, the science fiction writer, is not actually a person, but it's just a group of people from Eastern Europe that are writing good books because one person couldn't do such a diverse field of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the same theory about Ekan, that it's just four guys that are having their first name acronyms into the nickname.
Edgar, Kyle.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a four-headed monster, just playing 24/7. Yeah.
Okay,
It would be pretty funny. Go ahead.
I'm gonna do the tea very quickly. I have
good.
the water half boiled, so it should be 5 seconds, and then I'm gonna tweet and we can start.
Sounds good.
Baby, what do you want? What do you want? Sit. What do you want? I gave you the food. Okay.
By the way,
Yep.
I appreciate your choice of card art for today.
I did my research, as you can see. It's
I was
it's
like,
not Scryfall random. It's not Scryfall random.
it's right there. There is it. The original art right there.
I thought that the original would be the one. No?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this. We have Stream Manager, Twitter. Let's go. Do you have Twitter?
I do.
I'm going to write a message and tag you. Maybe you can retweet it so that your people will join up because.
Okay. You posted something earlier. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, no. I'll just post a new one with the link to the stream.
Will do. God, I recorded so many drafts yesterday.
Oh, you did play the MH3?
My eye started twitching after my 7th draft. It's just like, because I'm not just drafting, I'm just talking the whole time. So
I can imagine. This must have been draining.
I finished at like 10 or 11 last night, and I started at 8 a.m. So I think maybe draft 5 or 6, I might have started going off the rails. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is the kind of a format when going off the rails might be actually the right thing.
Yeah, I feel like I drafted this black-white mid-range deck that had some value, and then my opponent just played like 3 Eldrazi, and I just had no chance.
I had the same.
Yeah.
I managed to get 5 sneaky snackers in my deck yesterday, and buried alive, so I could actually fetch them to the graveyard, cast draw 3, and get the team
That's
back
pretty
together.
cool.
And I was paired with the LSV, and I thought that would be such a beautiful thing to beat him with sneaky snackers. The ultimate irony, but then he played Flage and killed me. So, and then I played Eldrazi, but I then figured out the problems that Eldrazi.
So this didn't, at least right off the bat, didn't feel like a particularly fast format. Just there's just so many chump blockers and an abnormal amount of reach creatures as well, where I just like green just has so many things with reach. I was just like, how do I actually even attack? I mean, that the Chrysalis is just not a reasonable Magic card.
I had 4 of them. I had 4 of them.
It's literally not reasonable. It would be it should be an uncommon, and it would still be great. That card is really, really silly. It's the best common, I feel. It's between that and the Lightning Bolt card. But
it is still a 4-drop, which is its redeeming, I think, feature, because you can go under it. I had that happen to me yesterday when I was developing my board. I played the Chrysalis, it got removed. Played the second one, it got removed, and then I was so much behind that I couldn't do much.
Right.
Go on, computer, you can do it. Hopefully that's the one. No, that's not the one. Obviously. Okay, and the tweet should be live now. So yeah, if you retweet this one and you're tagged in it, so you should get the notification.
Yep, got it. I think I retweeted it. Yep. All right.
No, we're not going to go over the MH3 games, but we just had it as a sort of pre-episode chat.
That's all that's going on in my head right now. I got to switch over back to OTJ, but I'm just thinking about MH3 right now, to be honest.
Yeah, better brush up on the cards, because I'll ask you a lot of questions and then I'll show you the graphs to show you the answers. So
I feel like I've played enough to know all the card names at this point, but we'll you know. I got my. I can tell you
there are 3 cards you might not know because you never have seen them in draft.
Fair enough.
And you'll be asked about them.
All right. Might be one of the special guest cards or whatever.
Yeah, I think there is one special guest, one big score, and one card from the actual factual set.
Got it.
It all will come at a certain stage. But yeah, the point is, oh god, stop. Now I have to trolling comment is of course the first one. If Equalizer, I wish I had the same kind of level enthusiasm when I stream solo, but probably that's why I invited Paul. Okay, are you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to start you mid sip, but
sorry.
Do you have any time kind of deadline?
As long as we finish before the NBA final starts in about 5 or 6 hours, I'm good.
Wow, that's
kids
generous.
come home in a couple hours. So
no. I'm thinking 1.5 hours, maybe with 10 minutes extra, plus minus should do.
Enough.
Depends on how long were you thinking and how much of side discussion and tangents we're going to go on.
Wherever the discussions go, Mavs in 4. I don't think so, but I mean, I'm rooting for the Mavs. So.
Okay, well, unfortunately, my knowledge of the NBA stopped when I stopped watching it, which was in 1991, I think. So yeah, I have a bit of a gap.
No worries.
Right, ready in 5. Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 122, and today we're going to be talking about the personal data of Paul Cheon. It will all relate to the OTJ and Paul's adventures in that format, which were quite successful, as you will see in a second. If you don't know my guest, and if you don't know me, I work in sustainability business, and recycling and reusing stuff is very important in sustainability. Therefore, I'm going to reuse the same introduction I gave to my other guest that I had some time ago, which was LSV, with one small difference. So, Paul was born in the crucible of hardcore Magic grinder circles of California in the early to mid 2000s, then had a very successful pro career, did also quite a lot of content creation, did a lot of commentary, then worked in game design. And at that stage in the LSV introduction, I said, and I wish I could say that my guest is a universally beloved member of the Magic community, but unfortunately, Paul Cheon couldn't be with us. And with you, I don't have to give that caveat. We actually have the universally beloved member of the Magic community, which is a great honor and a great pleasure for me to have. Also, we have someone that had absolutely ridiculous run in the OTJ with your freshly reinvigorated through circumstances we probably shouldn't be touching on career in Magic content creation. So someone's loss is our gain. Just a quick introduction of you. I made this beautiful graphic in the OTJ style.
Wow.
There you go. Your impressive pro career includes 9 GP top 8s, 3 wins, including one of them, if I'm not mistaken, was in Poland, wasn't it?
It was in Krakow, yes.
Yeah, there you go. You won the national. You were also in top 4 in the nationals at some other stage. You won the team world championship in the team with Sam Black. So quite impressive portfolio. No Pro Tour top 8 yet, but I think that with your current win rate on Arena, I'm pretty sure that you're going to go to a Pro Tour really soon through the Arena qualifiers somehow. I have that strong suspicion. You also were a set designer. That's how originally you started working in Wizards. If I'm not mistaken, Theros Beyond Death was something that you helped creating.
Yes.
A legend of coverage with Marshall always as a pair. It was a beautiful moment of the COVID era of content creation, which was rescued by your commentary. You were a streamer before you actually joined Wizards, and now you're a streamer again and a YouTuber predominantly, releasing, I don't know, 12 videos a day, it seems.
A lot. It's a lot.
No, the worst thing about them is that the quality doesn't suffer on the quantity. But most importantly for us, you are actually the top player on Arena for OTJ as seen on 17 lands. So I don't think that, given the volume of games you played, your win rate was not even close to anyone else that was playing OTJ, which is great to have you. I didn't know that you're going to have this kind of a win rate before I invited you, because I did
I
it
didn't
before
either.
I did it before the set started. But
Right.
it's a great coincidence that we can actually look at what does a person who wins more than everyone else do differently. Okay. Anything else that you have to plug for yourself that I forgot?
Honestly, I just forgot about all of my Magic accomplishments, to be honest. It's just been so long since I've played competitively. It's possible that maybe we can add something there, but I'm kind of past that stage in my life, just because despite making content, I do play less than all the soup. I mean, back when I was grinding with LSV back in our heyday when we were in our early 20s, I mean, that was 12 to 14 hours of Magic every single day to get to kind of the level where we were able to have success. And that's kind of what it takes. And now with the family and all, probably not going to be something I'm interested in, but we'll be looking to potentially get back into coverage. So that might be happening sooner rather than later. We'll see.
Oh, that would be great. I still think that I think opportunistic qualification for a pro tour is something that you wouldn't say no to.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
guessing.
I do play the arena qualifiers just because it's kind of a free roll, right? I think if you finish whatever top X in ranking, you just get a free invite to the arena championship qualifier. So I play in those. The only thing is I just don't really plan on traveling too much to play in these events. Just the cost versus return type thing just quite isn't there for me. So um, that's not something I'm interested in. But if I can qualify for the arena championship and do well online, which then gets me an invite to the pro tour, sure.
Yeah, I think that the qualifier gives you both the invites, so you get a pro
Right.
tour one and the arena open at the same time. So
Mhm.
they are linked, and it's 200 top 250 that qualifies for the thing.
Easy.
It's a very simple system.
Right.
Okay, so well, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to look into your data that I got from 17 lands. We have all your drafts that you made until a certain stage. So I think that the data cutoff was like 20th of May, but I think that you were playing also Cube and other formats after that time. So there was a bit maybe less focus on OTJ. It's still quite a large sample size, and we're going to look at firstly how you draft and maybe what you did differently than other people do, and secondly we're going to look at which cards perform better and worse in your hands, because I do know that from doing several of those episodes before, that very frequently people have a very clear vision of how they wanted their decks to look like. But when it comes to self-evaluating which cards were performing for them exceptionally well, there is sometimes a disconnect between the actual results of the card and how they were drafted. So there will be always some. I always find it interesting to focus on those discrepancies of cards that people are really high on without getting good results with them, and then still getting very good win rate altogether. So yeah, I think that every card performs better in Paul Cheon's hands. That's a true statement in the chat. But some of them do worse than other cards in Paul Cheon's hands, and we're going to focus on those cards that don't perform as well as some other cards in your capable but not infallible hands. Okay, so I know that I didn't give you much of a brief because I do like to keep my guests in the dark of what will be going on, because part of the episode is you guessing what you did and then looking at the reality of it. But what was your hopes when you're approaching this kind of content?
Honestly, because I have no idea kind of what to expect. I already have a decent sense for what I like and what I was tending to draft, but I am curious what my win rates are with a lot of the good cards, with a lot of the commons in the format, what I overdraft and what just I'm just interested in all the information, honestly, that you're gonna throw on me, and see if there's kind of a hole or a leak in my game that I can use to perhaps adjust my strategies moving forward. Always try to get better, right?
So I think that we're going to get a couple of answers to those questions, I think. And, those holes are not big, but when you want to get 70% win rate, you need to probably have very few holes in your gameplay, generally. And I don't analyze how you play the games. I can only analyze the drafting part, and I can only give you the impacts of what happened in the games without looking into the details, like, I don't know, missing a 2-drop or whatever. That kind of thing I cannot really analyze. So that will never happen. But this is you in numbers for OTJ. I have the data from between the 16th of April to 20th of May. It's 81 drafts in best of one, 583 games. You drafted 3,402 cards that we logged in that time. And your win rate was 69.8%, which means that you won over 400 of those 583 games, which is impressive. You'd drawn, I think that's the wrong number. That should be 25,000 cards, which is around 17.9 kilograms in paper. And for
That's such a random stat.
For the American viewers that maybe are not fluent in metric system, that's an average border collie size.
What is that, like 40-ish pounds or something?
Yeah.
No, it's at times 1.6. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's probably like 30 pounds.
30 pounds. Yeah. Okay.
I have to guess because I'm not experienced in the metric system, in imperial system, especially that there are some differences between American and British units, so that makes it even more complicated.
Fair enough.
All right, so first thing is the draft portion. And here we're going to look at several things. Most drafted cards, so the things that you drafted the most. And of course, I'm not going to just look at cards that you drafted the most because they will be all commons. I divided them based on rarity. I'm not going to look at rares and mythics because that's not so interesting, because that frequently is going to be just the luck of the draw. But with commons that you see hundreds of times and with uncommons that you see hundreds of times, you can already see some kind of trends. But drafting the cards is not necessarily telling us much, because drafting a card doesn't mean that you put it in your deck. So we're also going to look at cards that made your deck the most frequently, so the percentage of the time that you pick them, what percentage of the time they made the deck. And also I want to look at the cards that when you see them, you take them more frequently than the others, because part of it is that sometimes you will pick a card frequently because it goes late in the draft, but other cards you will see maybe half of the amount because they are like very priced commons, and still you're going to pick them as almost every time you see them. So we're going to look at those cards that are specifically you like because you always take them when you see them. And then we're going to look at, we're not going to look at actually percentage of playing the first pick, but we're going to look at a couple of other stats that I did for this episode specifically. So to start with, what do you think are your most drafted commons? And I selected 10. So,
that's a lot.
if you give me, you don't need to guess all of them, but if you give me like 2-3 that you think should be on that list, it would be more than enough.
Okay, so this one's interesting just because it's not necessarily what the best common is, right? Because you don't see them there as often. So it's just kind of, what cards do I think I draft the most?
See, already gaming me.
Well, I'm just trying to figure it out. Well, okay, I'm going to go with the good cards first. I think I put a really high emphasis on the card Consuming Ashes. So I don't know if that's on the... Should I make a bunch of guesses first? Is that what you
just
want
make 2-3 guesses, and we're going to move on.
Consuming Ashes, Throw from the Saddle, maybe Dance of the Tumbleweeds, Mystical Tether, Trained Erinx, Vault Plunderer, Mourner Surprise.
That's the who is who of the format, basically. Okay, I think we can go to the actual thing.
Sure.
Before you name all the comments in the set. But Consuming Ashes was an excellent first guess because that's your actually second most picked common. Vault Plunder was more picked because I think you see it more often. That's the main difference. Actually, you don't have Throw from the Saddle. You don't have the Mystical Tethers because I think that these are highly picked and maybe they were slightly lower priority. But also it might be the thing with the timing of your memory. And that's a bit of a spoiler for the future parts. Desperate Bloodseeker, Ambush Gigapede. These are the cards that were also going slightly later. And I think that you like to play those. Same with Mourner Surprise. Mirage Mesa, because you can play it in every deck. So you were pretty high on picking it. Trained Arix is there. Desert Stew is maybe one of those commons that you need to put more effort into getting that you drafted quite a lot of. And then we have Jailbreak Scheme and Patient Naturalist as closing statement. Jailbreak Scheme, I'm assuming more of an opportunistic pick because you can sometimes play it, sometimes not, but you can get them really late. And Patient Naturalist because I think that you had your phase where you were drafting quite a lot of black-green.
Yeah. Patient Naturalist definitely was started out a lot higher for me, just because I found that it was pretty clear early on that the green-white mount strategy was one of the best things to do. So a lot of people, they look at the deck that has the highest win rate and everybody just tries to force it early. We kind of saw that in Murders at Karlov Manor, right, where everybody was just drafting Boros. So I think I just kind of pivoted a little bit away from that and just drafted Golgari instead. And I feel like it wasn't that much worse anyways. And so I just leaned into that more. And Patient Naturalist is just a very solid card in that deck because any Dave Humphrey set is going to have a lot of ways to recur things from the graveyard. So Patient Naturalist is, of course, an excellent card at helping you fill up your yard and get you a little value.
That's a very good tip on the Dave Humphrey sets. Any cards that you don't see on the list that slightly surprise you?
I guess maybe a couple of those removal spells that I mentioned before, but I think that does make sense just because it is a green and white. Those the green card and the white card that I mentioned are also the best commons among the best commons of those colors, and green white is also heavily drafted. So it makes sense that they're not here, even though I put a pretty high priority when I see those cards. But it does, at least based on what I see here, it also just seems like I have a pretty big preference to drafting black and then pairing it with whatever.
Sorry.
No worries.
Wrong hole.
Yeah. Here, I'll choke with you.
Notably, there is a complete lack of red cards, unless you count Mirage Mesa as potentially red land. But
yes, or blue. I mean, there's I guess one blue card, but I mean we can get into this a little bit later. But to be completely honest with you, when I started, I basically just lived in Abzan land for the most part. I mean, I just was drafting only cards that were green, black, or white, and any combination of those were just good, right? Like those are the three. Also, those are among the three best color combinations. So that was just really my lane. I just felt like they were the deepest colors and the best colors, and I just did everything I could to just avoid blue specifically. I just thought blue was really weak. Blue only, in my opinion, was good with black. And I just didn't like the blue-red deck. Even when it was open and I got the signpost uncommons and I was like, all right, I got all the cards, I would just still lose. I just didn't do as well. So I just tried my best to avoid those. And because of that, because when you draft blue, there's only one color combination that I'm really happy with, unless I'm a blue-green Bonnie Paul deck or whatever. I just really try to stay away from it. And honestly, not only that, just the blue commons are just terrible. There's like, I would take the fifth best black common over Phantom Interference probably, and that's why I just never ever ended up in blue or red all that often.
Yeah, that's and we're gonna see it very well because we're gonna paint your evolution of how you drafted the format. I think pretty decently with those numbers. So okay, let's move to the uncommons. What do you think your most drafted uncommons were? And keep in mind, we're talking. I think that your most drafted uncommon was 20 times.
Yeah.
So these are not like huge numbers. Their memory might be very fickle in those kind of smaller numbers.
Yeah. I'm gonna say maybe Bee-Spawned Outcaster and Lassoed by the Law, and the what I'm already thinking about Modern Horizons 3, the Outcaster Greenblade. Those I'll say and Hollow Marauder. I'll go with those four.
Okay, let's go with those.
All right.
Good save in the last second with the Hollow Marauder.
Yes. I did have a deck with 3 of them, so that
that does help. That's why I say that those numbers are small. Uncommons, are not so easy to get.
Right.
Bee-Spawned Outcaster is there. Clear Shot. I think that this card was going really late for how powerful it is in this format. You could always get one, like pick 5, 6 very frequently, even though green was contested. That was a bit strange to me. We have the Lassoed by the Law. I think that one of the cards you mentioned is not there, but probably is close to the
green blade, probably just because everybody else put such a high priority on it.
That card was so good. I mean,
and the armadillo as well. So
yeah, but you have Back for More. You have You have Getaway Glamour, Prairie Dog, Stubborn Borrow Fiend, Slickshot Lockpicker as the only blue card. There's always that one blue card that gives hope for the whole color somehow.
It does. It does.
And Prosperity Tycoon. That actually I was quite surprised, but probably because that one goes slightly later, and it is a good card. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. It's just maybe lower level than all the top things that you were picking. So that probably one was a bit more opportunistic, and the same probably about Prairie Dog, which is also good, but it's not like Clear Shot or Beastbond Outcaster kind of level.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think Prairie Dog is quite as good. It's still pretty solid, and I still just see it kind of late. So I do take it just because I put a high priority on the good 2-drops. The Lassoed by the Law is certainly one where I just, even if I'm not white, I just take it. It's just that powerful. So oftentimes I just take it, especially because if I'm not base white, I'm probably black green, at least early on in the format. So I just find a way to splash it. And
and if you're a black blue, you also are obliged to play Desert, so you easily put the Lassoed into those decks.
Exactly.
Because why wouldn't you?
And yeah, and the thing is, I mean, there's a lot of other enchantment based, not a lot, but there's a decent number of other enchantment based removal spells in the format. So the fact that this can actually just eat opposing tethers and Buried in the Gardens actually ends up being relevant a good amount of the time.
7 is the number you're looking for. There are 7 Oblivion Rings in OTJ.
Oh, yeah, wow. That is a lot. Oh, Journey to Nowhere. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
There's exactly 7.
7.
I'm not going to name all of them right now because lots of them are in the bonus sheets. But yeah, I did this statistic before the set was released. I mean, one of them is equipment. One of them is the Tension Sphere. So there's and technically you can count the Frailed. What was it? The 5-mana blue-white spell that exiles something and then you get a copy
Fractured
of it.
Loyalty.
Fractured Loyalty. That technically is an Oblivion Ring.
Oh, Fractured Identity. Fractured Identity.
Fractured Identity. It's technically an Oblivion Ring. That would make it 8, actually.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so this is going to be a much more difficult task, I think. Normally it is, at least. Which cards... Oh, no, this actually might be easier. Which cards, when you drafted them, almost always made the deck? And I only looked at the cards that were picked 10 times or more. And there's 20 of the cards that you always put in your deck. And actually, that is something very atypical. Normally, people stay within 90% rate with their top 15 cards. You picked cards, you knew that you're putting them in your deck, which is probably telling something about your drafting style, actually.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Vault Plunderer, Mystical Tether. I did play that a lot. But I mean, sheesh.
I mean, have to keep in mind, you have to put them 100% of the time that you picked it, they ended up in your deck.
Okay. So this is not just even commons. This is just okay. So yeah, then we're gonna go with
it's gonna be mainly commons, and there are some uncommons on the list.
Yeah, but I have to pick them 10 times only, and I saw the last sheet, and all those cards I took over 20 times. So I imagine it's gonna be a lot of those cards. So let's go with Hollow Marauder, Lassoed by the Law. I picked 10 times that I always play them. So it's going to be something that's highly splashable. It's got to be those two. It's got to be those two cards. Possibly almost always made the deck. Desert's Due, maybe not. I didn't even take that card that highly.
Stick to it.
All right, fine. Desert's Due. Deserts Due. I mean, it's in my mind, it's basically going to be anything that I can. It's going to be like a removal spell or just something that's very easy to splash. So those are the things that
I think you'll be surprised about some of those cards. But we can move to them right now.
Okay.
So one thing that you could have said instantly was Mirage Mesa, because that makes every deck.
Yeah, I haven't gamed this enough.
Desert's Due is like a very good guess, because even though you drafted it 37 times, all 37 of the times you actually managed to put it in your deck. Then you have Creosote Heath, because I assume you never pick it unless you want to put it in your deck, because you need to dedicate a high pick to it. Hollow Marauder, nailed it. 20 times drafted, 20 times made the deck. Hard Bristle Bandit, that was a bit surprising to me, but I guess that you only picked it when you wanted to have it in your deck as well, because you need to dedicate a high pick to it. Yep. Then you have Glamour, Slickshot Lockpicker, another card that you just don't pick willy-nilly, speculatory. Mm-hmm. Servant of the Stinger, that maybe is a bit more surprising. Rambling Possum, Giant Beaver, Outcaster Greenblade, Shepherd of the Clouds, Eroded Canyon, I guess, again, desert that you need to dedicate a high pick to, you would rather be playing it.
Yep.
And that was probably for splashing more than anything, looking
Mhm.
at your tendency to not play blue-red. Bristling Backwoods, Rictus Robber, you always put it when you drafted it. Intrepid Stablemaster, Murder, Rattleback Apothecary, and Tyrant's Scorn. This is the list. You actually managed not to put the Lassoed by the Law once in your deck.
Wow.
Somehow.
What's wrong with me?
Maybe the deserts were cut.
Yeah, maybe that's wild.
So any surprising cards on that list?
Yeah, I'm surprised that I put Hardbristle Bandit in all of my decks. I just feel like there just had to have been some instances where I took it and then I ended up going into green white and then it just didn't fit in that deck. But I guess that just didn't happen often enough.
No, it didn't happen often enough, and by often enough we mean once.
Ever.
But that shows discipline, that you're only picking it when
Right.
it was one of the highest drafted commons by the arena users. So it was not super easy to pick it just randomly, opportunistically, because it was almost gone by pick 5, pick 6. So that's
Yeah,
probably one of the reasons.
it was a card that I had really high when the format started, just because I saw all the large green creatures that I wanted to ramp into. But I think as the format continued to develop, I just kind of liked it less and less. There's just other ways to fix your mana. The 2-mana 1/1 body wasn't all that great, and I don't necessarily want it in the green white or the aggressive strategies. So I guess I just put a lower priority on it as the format matured, and so everybody was just taking it before it even got to a place where I was looking to take it.
For me, a couple of surprising cards on the list are Rambling Possum and Giant Beaver. Should I understand it that you only picked those when you were dedicated mount deck and you didn't touch them when you didn't want the mounts?
So I think the beaver is just fine. It's just a fine creature on rate, and you're just gonna play it in most of your decks. I feel like I just don't cut the beaver that often. It's just 4-mana 4/4 gets you stats. And yeah, with the possum, I don't take it super highly, but if I'm a dedicated mount deck, or if I do have a lot of creatures that enter the battlefield and give me some kind of an effect, I'll put a higher priority on that. Let's say I have a few extra Vault Plunderers or Green Blades, or just, other little things that I could maybe get value in the late game, then I'll also take it a little bit higher.
Just bounce the shepherd and go on.
Bounce the shepherd. That's really slow, but it does give you a lot of value.
It's slow, but hey, who cares? No, the thing that surprised me more, especially with the beaver, is that when you look at the number of the times you picked it, it's only 15 times. When compared to something like Desert's Dew, which is a high pick common, you picked it 37 times. So you were not super keen on picking those beavers, but once you picked them, you put them in. So
Right.
I think that there is some kind of maybe subconscious, you are a very selective person when you pick cards, like super rigorous in terms of, because I did those data for many players, and I've never seen someone who was so strict about having cards that they put 100% of the time in their deck. But so to put it like that, you are very selective when you draft, and then once you drafted it, that card will be in the deck. While there are other players that are maybe less selective in the draft and more speculative in the draft, and then they will make decisions on the deck building stage. But you are super, super streamlined into picking the cards, and if they are picked, they go in the deck. It's, I think, a slightly different wiring of how you approach drafts. And I mean, as we've seen, it is successful. So maybe this is the way to be more selective and more drafting with the deck in mind, and rather than going all around the place to try to find your lane and speculate on picks and then abandon cards that are high picks.
Yeah. I mean, I think once kind of in middle to the late parts of pack 1, you're able to kind of get a pretty good sense for what your lane's supposed to be. And so once I kind of have a decent understanding, or just kind of a good feeling, and after a bunch of drafts, you just kind of know, you're just like, I've seen 4 packs and just maybe there's this one white card, but I haven't seen a bunch of white cards. Like, you just instinctively just kind of recognize that certain colors are just being cut, even when you randomly see a weird card. And so I've been able to pretty quickly pick up on what I need to be. And once I know, for example, that I need to be the black green deck, or once I know that I am the white green deck, then I will kind of shift my priorities and draft accordingly. So, if I'm going to be green white, yes, I'm going to take the beavers a little bit higher just because it's a mountain creature, and of course you're going to get a little more value there. Generally, though, the beavers I actually don't value too highly. Maybe that's another thing too. I think part of that is just because I feel like green just has a lot of good rate creatures. So I don't prioritize them very highly at all. You have Spinewoods Paladin, you have the Giant Beaver, and you have the Cactarantula, right? And you can't get too many of those cards. So for me, they're all solid in their own ways, and I just prioritize removal higher than the creatures. So that's often what I'll do early, and then I'll just play whatever creature I get to kind of fill out my curve. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, if I'm heavy mounts and I'm like, okay, I need a big creature, I'll take it. But early on, I definitely focus on the other aspects of my deck, and I don't put as big of an emphasis on the bigger green creatures necessarily.
Yeah, I think that you touched on a nice point there. If I understood it correctly, that you have dynamic pick orders for different archetypes, but once you click onto the lane, it's very fixed, and that's maybe explains why so many of those cards you always play them when you pick them, because despite them being very dynamic into like I'm drafting green white differently than I'm drafting green black, and different cards have different priorities for me when I do that. You have very clear visions of how those archetypes look like, and maybe that's explaining part of this. Because when you look at the list of those cards, it's mainly green, black, and white cards. It's mainly Abzan. For a good reason, you drafted much more Abzan. But your drafting of Selesnya and your drafting of Golgari, very, very different lanes and very clear visions. You had, because some players will have more of like an analog kind of drafting scale where those cards will be fluent, and you have very fixed pick orders for those two archetypes. And also another thing that may or may not be important and format specific here is that some of those cards were just, as you said, very easy to splash. You can always play Lassoed by the Law if you're playing black-green, because splashing it is relatively trivial with the number of deserts you have.
Yeah. No, that's a thing. That's why it's really hard to do, even just because I've been starting to dabble with this as well, just like set reviews in general and top 5 lists of commons or whatever, just because things are just fluid. It all just depends on the deck that you are. So, but the thing is, you can't just break it up. It's like, oh, this card is a C in green white, a C plus in green black, and a C minus in red green, right? But in my head, because I've just drafted the Abzan archetypes so often, at some point, it all just kind of clicked, and I just had a clear understanding of how good a card was in each archetype, and then I just kind of drafted accordingly.
Note here that sometime was probably day 2 of the format, judging by the data.
Possibly. I like blue too, in general, but...
Okay, this is a graph that I never did for any of the data analysis of the people, but I thought that yours was so interesting that I might actually show it. These are those 20 cards that you always played when you picked them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that you have sort of 3 categories of the cards there. The cards that you always played when you picked them, the cards that you almost always played when you picked them, and they go maybe somewhere till here. And then there is this big shift, and then there are the cards that you will sometimes play because you have to.
Okay.
And I think that this is an interesting way to look, and maybe at some stage I can do those analysis for players when I get their data. Just basically looking at this core cards of the given set versus the auxiliary card. I tried to look at your win rates when you based on the number of those core cards in your deck. Mm-hmm. But actually, you don't have a clear trend there. So it's not like you had high win rates when you had most of those core cards. Okay. Because, of course, you can have a lot of bombs that are not core cards because you don't see them a lot. And that will probably muddle the waters here. But sure. maybe for actually MH3, that doesn't look like it has particularly powerful rares. That kind of analysis might be more interesting.
Yeah.
But I thought it was especially this like almost seismic jump from the cards that you play more than 70% of the time to cards that you play 55% of the time and less. And also I think that the steepness of that curve changes.
That's a pretty big drop off.
It is, yeah. I found it quite impressive. And of course, that leaves us with the cards that are in here, the ones that you picked but you never played.
Oh,
And what do you think are those cards? I think there are 5 of them. The cards that you picked more than 10 times, but you never put them in your deck.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is where it becomes hard.
All right. All right.
Oh, there's 6 of them actually.
Okay. Let's go. Spring Splasher. Iron Fist Pulverizer. Sheesh. I mean, I imagine most of those cards are just going to be blue and red cards. The stupid armadillo, trained armadillo. I just feel like I always see it last pick, and it just always ends up in my pile. Yeah, because I don't think I've ever played that armadillo. And then let's just go with those 3, I guess. I
Okay,
don't know.
good. Let's quit while we're ahead.
Oh, and the red combat trick. The red combat trick. Quick draw.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm asking which one because it can be either of the 2. I can tell you that you played the Iron Fist Smasher exactly once.
Probably didn't do well.
Probably not, but stupid armadillo number 1.
Yes.
You picked it 24 times and you played it 0 times. Yeah. Spring Splasher, you got it. There is the quick draw. There is the other trick, Outlaw's Fury. You played it 14 times without putting it. No, you picked it 14 times without putting it in your deck. Harrier's Strix and Rodeo Pyromancers. Those are the 6 cards that you played.
These cards are so bad. There you go.
I think of those, I think that there is a spot for Outlaw's Fury. It's not a great spot, but as a one-off in white-red deck, but you never played white-red either.
I drafted some towards the end. Oftentimes I need a Bruce Tarl to move into it. But Outlaw's Fury, I mean, if there was like another common that generated Outlaws, there just wasn't quite enough for Outlaw's Fury to quite get there. I mean, outside of some weird deck, if you have like 4 prickly pairs or something like that.
Yeah, it would be great with this card from Modern Horizons that makes 2 goblins or whatever.
Oh, sure. It would certainly be good in MH3 where you just have a ton of tokens.
Okay. This is a completely different contest because this is not even about the cards that you have ever seen in the draft. There are 3 cards in the set and the supplements that you have never seen in the draft. I can tell you that one of the cards is from the main set, one of the cards is from Big Score, and one of the cards is a special guest. So you've seen 9 out of 10 of the special guests during the draft, but one of them you never seen even.
Never. God, I don't even know all the special guests. Mystic Snake? Maybe
no,
I've seen it.
That's not it. Okay, so one down. So a big scorecard that you've never seen.
A big scorecard that I've never seen.
And it's a good one, actually. Probably that's why I've never seen it.
Oh, it's a good one. Collector's Cage?
No, you've seen it once, actually.
Okay.
I do remember that because I looked at data. And main set card that you've
main
never
set
seen.
Card? That is
main set.
Crazy. I feel like I should have seen everything
mythic,
by now.
But, it is a mythic, but it happens that some of them you will just never see.
This one, I have no idea just because I feel like I've seen it all.
Okay. I mean, you might have seen it in your opponent's head.
Yeah. No.
Final Showdown is the one.
Final Showdown. You're right.
Harvester of Misery is the big score card that you've never seen, and Morbid Opportunist, which is the special guest that you have never had a chance of getting. I always found that this is the funnest part of guessing, but there is also a more fun part of guessing, I think, coming up our way.
Okay.
But before we go to that, we have the snap pick category, and this is a different one. Cards that you pick and then you decide whether you put it in your deck or not is one thing. But as we learned from you, maybe it's more important to look at the cards that when you see them, you pick them. And here we have the commons, like which cards have you taken almost every time you saw them? And of course, in terms of commons, it's not almost every time. I think that the best score is like 40% of the time that you've seen this particular card, you've picked it. But what are the commons that you snap pick? And here, just advice to you in guessing, we're going to be focusing on those powerful commons, more or less.
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to guess or?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. I mean, it's got to be Consuming Ashes and Throw from the Saddle. That's got to be the top 2 for me. Um, and then maybe Desert's Dew after that. Those are probably the top three that I would
Okay,
guess.
so let's look at it, because in one way you nailed it, in one way you failed it.
Oh man.
Because the order is perfect. It's just that they are not 1, 2, 3. They're 2, 3, 4.
Oh,
Because
okay.
Vault Plunderer, you were actually probably higher on it than you imagine.
But so the only reason why I said it that the other way is because whenever I have that pick, I generally take the removal spell over the Vault Plunderer. So
Mhm.
it's just I'm seeing Vault Plunderer more because people also, I guess, value it slightly
But
less than me.
I think that the thing with Vault Plunderer is that you will frequently see it pick 5, 6, 7,
Yeah,
and
and
you
then I just
snap
take it.
and you
Oh yeah.
snap pick it because it's the best card in the pack, because the bombs are gone and
Yep.
you know the path how to get to Vault Plunderer.
That's right.
But it's actually a really good guess with Consuming Ashes throw from the Settled Desert. We have Mystical Tether that you pick around roughly once and 3 times. And you have to think about it. It's like you will see
Yeah.
it in packs with like the ordinary Brushwag and Bristle Bill when you open it,
Yep.
and then you of course pass it. Picking a common 33% of the time is quite a high number actually, and
Oh,
42 is
okay.
also pretty impressive. Then you have Desperate Bloodseeker. This is also impressive because you see that card quite late, which means that when you saw that decent black cards were going late, you were probably snap picking them and moving into the black lane. Mirage Mesa, Spinewoods Paladin, Trained Arix, and Creosote Heath. Any surprises on that list, or?
I mean, this mostly checks out. Everything's in the Abzan colors, and I take them highly. So.
There you go. Yeah, I think that
I guess maybe no Cactarantula.
I oh
I thought
we're
I
gonna
would
have a
see it.
conversation about
Oh
Cactarantula. Don't
man,
worry.
okay, all right.
I'm missing Festering Gulch.
Okay.
But maybe it
Sure.
was just below that. It
Yeah.
gets very flat after the top 10. So
Yep.
okay, the same but for uncommons. And here we will see cards that you've picked double the frequency of the commons in some cases. So
this one's got to be easy.
Uncommons are so much more powerful.
Yeah, this has got to be Lassoed by the Law, Outcaster Greenblade, Spinewoods Armadillo, Hollow Marauder are going to be my and. Does Buried in the Garden count? I don't know if that.
It does. Yeah.
Okay, let's say Buried in the Garden.
I know because I saw it on the list. I have the second copy of the presentation that I can go forward because I don't remember everything from every top 10 that you made. Well, you nailed it with the Lassoed by the Law. You picked it 70% of the time you saw it. So that is impressive because that card was highly picked, which means that you picked it over most of the rares actually. So that's and the card was pickable over most of the rares, honestly. We're not talking about the most oppressive green ones, but if it was a non-green rare, probably Lassoed by the Law is better than that.
Right.
Then the second one most picked for you was Stubborn Burrowfiend, and that is a bit surprising to me. But
yeah, I mean, so the reason why I think I value that so highly is because it's it's just a great creature in any deck, but it just allows you to flex into both, right? It's just fantastic in white-green, just because it's a mount, it beats down, but then also just the self-mill aspect of it, and black-green is also quite strong. And those are kind of the two color combinations I was looking to be anyways. So that's why I think I put such a high priority on this card, and I took it so highly.
Yeah, I think that it's also like this perfect mid-range card that when you play it on turn 2, you're the beatdown. And when you draw it late, it's actually a great finisher at some stage because you should have stabilized by then, and also allows you to get this grindy kind of recursion stuff going, which green, black, and with maybe splashing of white was so good at. Clear Shot, that makes sense. Spinewoods Armadillo, that makes sense. Notably, there is no Hollowed Marauder. So, and I think that I know why, but we're gonna get there later when the time is right to discuss that.
All right.
And that will be when we talk about your win rate evolution across the format. Buried in the Garden, Journey to Nowhere, that's another collection of removal. Beastbond Outcaster, you were actually higher on that one than you were on the Hollow Marauder.
Fair enough.
Shepherd on the Clouds, and the token blue card in Marauding Sphinx. And
no red card, but
I totally agree with the Marauding Sphinx. This was, for me, the reason to be Demir, basically, because it was such a good finisher in those decks. Yeah, and then I realized I actually had a terrible win rate with Marauding Sphinx. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I've had what looked to be a good blue-black deck, but without the Marauding Sphinx, it's just really hard to close out games. I'm just like, oh, I got all the lock pickers, I got the removal spells and whatever. It's like, how do I win? Right? Just the creatures are just so bad. So Marauding Sphinx is just that way to just close out the games. And I feel like most of my blue trophy decks likely will have 1 or 2 copies of this creature.
I don't know. To me, in this format, the answer to how do I win this game 95% of the time was Onyx Rothstein.
Sure.
And somehow you're going to win. It just
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You're going to outgrind them. In the end, your paladins are going to trade enough times that your thing is the last thing standing.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love black. There were just so many good ways to just recur things from the graveyard. Eventually, your opponent just would run out of resources, and that's how you would win a lot of games. I mean, this is a format where also just draw 3 was like you could take the time to draw 3 cards. That was actually really, really good, right? You just like this is a format where you take a bunch of removal spells, take a bunch of card draw spells, and that's a recipe for success because the format wasn't quite as ridiculously, or it didn't feel that way. The format didn't feel as fast as, for example, the previous set where you had this one archetype that just went underneath everything else.
That is very true. Okay, so we are sort of reached the halfway stage of the presentation, and normally in the halfway stage presentation, I do this game, and that game has a hidden reason for it. But the game is Card X or Discerning Peddler, and I'm going to give you a choice between Discerning Peddler and Card X, and I want you to answer which card did you pick more frequently. And by frequently, I mean when you saw it, higher percent of the time did you pick Card X or the Discerning Peddler.
Okay, so, I should get this right. All right.
So first card we have the Discerning Peddler or Giant Beaver. Which card did you pick higher percentage of the time?
It's got to be the Beaver.
It is the Discerning Peddler.
Oh, see, I did. You know what? I should have known. This is a trap. All right.
Yeah, you picked Discerning Peddler 12.1% of the time you saw it, and you picked Giant Beaver 11.7% of the time. It's very close.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood the question. This is not when I'm picking between the 2 cards.
No.
I see the card.
Generally, when you see the card.
Got it. Okay.
The first one is always the warming up. But here we have Discerning Peddler and Vile Smasher Gleeful Grenadier.
I'm going to go with the Peddler.
You are correct.
All
it
right.
should be 12.1 for the Peddler and 7.6 for the Vile Smasher. Okay, Discerning Peddler or Snakeskin Veil?
I bet you it's the Peddler.
No, it is actually Snakeskin Veil.
Man, come on. I thought I was onto your games.
I couldn't do all of them for Discerning Peddler. That would be too easy. You would get the pattern, I have to mix it up a bit.
I just feel like I think I ended up just being a little bit lower on Snakeskin Veil than a lot of other people.
You were very much lower on
so that's Veil. Why I thought maybe I took the Peddler.
Very much lower.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the Discerning Peddler versus Drover Grizzly.
Grizzly. Oh, come on.
Discerning Peddler wins again.
I might as well flip a coin here. This is ridiculous. All right.
Okay, Discerning Peddler versus Fake Your Own Death.
Fake Your Own Death. Okay.
It is correct. I think that we can discount the first one as you were still confused about the nature of the game. True. So we are 2-2. I think that's a fair result. Okay.
All right.
But I make this game every single time, and every single time I pick a card that has around 12.5% result here.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a very important reason for that. Because, and here is my eternal card choice, cards you never pick are the ones where you disagree with the rest of the Magic world the most. Because if you had the worst card possible in the world, like this one, and that one costs 12 mana and is a legendary creature, human jester 1/1, if you draft worst card ever, you lose the next 3 matches.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely don't want to pick it.
Right.
And yet, you will still pick it 12.5% of the time because you will be forced to pick it when it's left in the pack and no one else picked it. And of course, 1/8 is 20.5%.
Right.
So really bad cards should have around 12.5% pick rate, just naturally. If it becomes lower than that, that means that some people want to pick it, but you don't want to pick it. And therefore, it's interesting to look at the cards that have this pick rate that is below 12.5%, because this is where your personal difference with general arena population and you can be seen.
Okay.
So, which cards that you've seen more than 50 times you picked almost never? And this is the next question. And this will lead us to maybe the most interesting insight into your mind of which cards you disagreed with an average arena user the most.
So we touched on it earlier. I think Snakeskin Veil might be one of them. It might even be the other combat trick. Maybe Hard Bristle Bandit, and maybe Take Up the Shield.
No, I think that you were high enough on those in
Okay,
all
fair
three
enough.
cases. Definitely the card that you very much disagreed with the Magic community was Rakish Crew.
Oh, these are
which
the
you
really
picked,
bad cards. Okay.
which you picked 0 times, and you've seen it 67 times.
Okay.
So out of 67 times, not even once, not even decided, what, for science, I'll give it a try. No.
Yep.
Mr. Consistent, definitely not picking it up. These are the cards that you are dead right not to pick. Cards like Requisition Rate, cards like Deadeye Duelist. But these are the cards that, it won't tell you much that you don't like them, because you know exactly why you're not picking Bovine Intervention.
I physically felt something when I started reading all these cards. Is like I had to hold back the urge to vomit. So yes, these cards are no good.
But we have to keep in mind that my content is aimed at the medium to upper intermediate level of the player, and not
That's
necessarily
fair.
Paul Cheon. And if you are especially maybe a newer player, some of those cards might appeal to you, like Sheriff of the Safe Passage, or Bovine Intervention. I think is a great example of a card that can trap a fresher player, because it's a removal. Okay, they get a 2/2. No. It's not okay that they're getting a 2/2. Very often, that 2/2 is not much of a downgrade from what you're killing. And yes, of course, sometimes you'll kill like a 6/6 flying demon, and then you feel like a genius. But then you play against an aggro deck that has 1/1s and 2/2s, and what do you do with that Bovine Intervention? Are you downgrading them from 2/2 menace to a 2/2 non-menace? That's not worth 2 mana, literally.
Right. I mean,
but
it's a 2 mana spell that says you can't cast this until like turn 4 or 5 of the game, right? It just rots in your hand just because you're never going to use it on a 2-drop. Very rarely are you going to use it on a 3-drop. It's got to be something big enough. There's something worth killing, and even then they still have something left over, which is why it's just not all removal not all removal spells are built the same. So this one is understandably very low for me, at least.
Put your designer's hat on for a second. How would you fix this type of removal? Because it exists from time to time, and it just fails every single time. How would you make that type of removal actually valid? Make it more expensive and tag on another effect, or make it modal?
I mean, you already see it occasionally where you have these white sorcery level spells that exiles a creature and it's cost like 5 mana. That's one way to do it. I think this is just the other side. It's like if you wanted to design a cheap removal spell, you have to give them something, right? So I think the only thing that you can do is kind of make it cheaper. I mean, perhaps if you made this 1 mana, it would make it more interesting, but you still don't cast this early, right? So
exactly, that's my thing. That once you cast it late, you might as well make it 5 mana and then exile a creature. Both of you make a 2/2. Something like that.
I think the key is to just, I mean, maybe you just give them a smaller body. It's just giving them a 2/2 just makes it so it's just you just can't ever cast this early. I think one of the best implementations of a good, cheap, efficient removal that does give you a downside is Path to Exile. That's like a really nice one where you still don't ever really want to cast this early, but when you do cast this late, a land doesn't really do anything for your opponent, so it's a lot more palatable, and it costs 1 mana. So that's
I actually like how they solved it in the MH3 with the blue removal, because let's be fair, the enchantment that makes a creature into a 1/1, that's basically the same thing. But the fact that it has the exile clause, but not a super easy exile clause, makes it an interesting one, because you have to pay colorless mana to use the exile ability. So that's fine, I guess.
Which I found out. I found out the hard way. I was like, wait a second. It's when I just didn't completely read the card, and I just thought it was 3 mana, just 2 and a blue, and I was like, wait, I can't actually exile the creature. This is not good. But I do like Blue's implementation of that. We saw that with Dramatic Accusation in the previous set, and which is also kind of why I wasn't as high on Stop Cold, even though it was okay. There's just enough things to do with the permanent that's in play. I just don't ever generally like effects like that.
Yeah, it's always a problem. Like it makes you casting fight spells so much more secure if you're casting it from on a creature that is under a tap aura already, because okay, kill it in response, whatever.
Right.
I lost the creature I didn't have in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could, because White's had effects like this where you get to do something and they draw a card. So maybe, I think that would still be bad, but at least you just don't get totally devastated in terms of tempo.
Would I late in the game? I'd rather have them 2/2.
Or maybe you let them scry. I don't know, right? Let's say you just like kill a thing and they get to scry 2 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's tricky. But hopefully, luckily, it's not our job to.
I haven't been a designer for a long time, so.
All right, we have the gameplay now, and here we are going to venture into the win rates. So we're going to look at, first of all, your win rate in time, and I think that is a very interesting way for you to introspect. This is the part that I think is mostly for you, in terms of like you get the most out of it, because you can look at your story of how you played OTJ through a slightly different lens, and actually maybe come to the realizations that you sort of had in the back of your head, but maybe never verbalized. And I've seen that happening before with people. Some of them were pretty surprised. Some of them knew exactly, like I had it with some Black and Hugh, probably could recite his win rates across the format and how he changed the play preferences, because he knew that he would change his play preferences based on the episode of Drafting Archetypes he was recording.
Fair enough.
But then we're going to look at some color win rates, and we're going to look at some card win rates. And just a word of warning, this is all based on small sample sizes. These card win rates, you shouldn't draw too much attention to a single card win rate. But if there are some patterns, it's interesting to see. And I think that there are a couple of cards, especially on the low win rate side, that might be surprising to you when we look at it.
Okay.
First of all, I have to introduce the concept of running average. Because the win rates are dumb and it's I won, I lost, it's very hard to plot nicely win rate over time. Okay. So instead of that, instead of looking at graph that goes up and down between ones and zeros in an incoherent pattern, what you can do is you can take a snapshot. And here I take a snapshot of 10 games. And then I take another snapshot. I move it by 1, and I calculate the average win rate for those 10 points. And then I make another snapshot, and I make an average for another 10 points. And I continue with that along the line. And in the end, I can plot this running average, and I can observe if it's rising or if it's decreasing. And it looks much more coherent for people to analyze when I look at this kind of running average metric. Okay. So for this data, I did your win rates. It's a running average of last 100 games. So the first point is your first 100 games in the format. And then second point will be game 2 to game 101, and so on until we get to the game 484 to game 583. Okay. First of all, let's look at your generic win rate. And what do you think? What was your winningest period of the format, and how did your win rate evolve over time as you played the OTJ?
I think my highest win rate was, honestly, kind of almost immediately. I feel maybe the first month. I feel like I think maybe my style of play and draft kind of lined up with what was going to be successful in the format, at least early on. So I feel like that first month or so is my highest win rate. And then I feel like it maybe started slowing down towards the end in the second month, once people caught up, and then there were a lot more multicolor strategies that ended up being viable that I didn't really mess around with a lot in the beginning.
Okay, I think that you are 90% spot on.
Okay.
I just don't think that the term slowed down is the right description of what happened.
Oh, okay.
This is your win rate across the format. And you started really high at 70%. Then it increased. And I think you peaked in somewhere like at the beginning of May with here you have a period where you had 100 games with 84 wins, which is impressive in its own right.
That's
And
pretty
then we
ridiculous.
see this thing happening where you
Oof.
dropped to the pathetic 65% win rate. My win rate for OTJ was 64% across the format. Thank you very much.
Oh wow.
So that your pathetic level is 1 percentage point higher than my total win rate for the format. I don't feel great about it. You had your absolute bottom here, rock bottom at 59% win
Damn.
rate in 100 games, and you started recovering towards the end. And then we see that you took a break from the format, and the last couple of drafts are.
Yeah, I went on a little. I took a vacation or a trip, so I had to record a bunch of videos.
That's here.
Like, yeah,
and
because
here.
because I took a 2-week break at the end of May. I was in Korea, and so I make daily videos. So I still needed to make videos. So I did like 2 a days basically to kind of cover the end of May, which is why you see that huge gap. I think I got one draft in Korea though. You still see one little thing there.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it is interesting what happened here. And hopefully in a second we're going to get there and we're going to see potentially why that changed.
Yep.
Okay, let's move to the world of art because I like to do those kind of things.
Okay.
So Pablo Picasso was famous for having different periods of his career, and those included color periods, which one of them was blue period, one of them was rose period, where he used different tints, and you can see that this picture is definitely bluer than nature should allow. And rose period had a lot of those kind of broken and grayish pinks used all through the pictures. And of course, every Magic player also has their color periods during each format. And do you think that you had moments of the format when particular color combinations, and I don't want to hear the answer, I was Abzan, yeah? Do you have moments when your particular colors were preferred by you, and how do you think it played out as the format went through?
You don't want to hear me say it's Abzan.
Not all the way through. I want to be more specific.
Okay. I would say that for the first month or so, that's kind of where I really that was my bread and butter, kind of that Abzan combination. And then I think after that, I started exploring other archetypes because it was getting pretty clear. It's just kind of one of those things where the world catches up, and those colors were definitely a lot more contested. And then when that's the case, I started delving into other archetypes and trying to figure out, for example, one archetype that I did want to draft and that I just like drafting, even though I don't even know if I particularly did well with it, were the crime decks. So I really wanted to draft the crime decks, but I just didn't end up there as often as I'd like, and I wasn't exactly sure how to. Yeah, Dimir or Grixis. I mean, namely the Cruel Ultimatum control decks. I have a couple of those that I trophied with, which were really, really fun. It's just Cruel Ultimatum is one of my favorite cards of all time, so I'm really happy that they put it in there and gave you just enough fixing to try to pull it off. And then I feel like as the format kind of evolved, I'd like to say that I was a little more flexible and didn't always just draft Abzan every single opportunity and tried to do other things. But I do feel like maybe my win rate also suffered as a result of that.
Okay, so let's look at your actual data. And I always find it impressive how repeatable it is across different players, that we have those transition periods where something shakes up and you change, and you can see that in the data when you start looking for it. So here you have the graph, and each point color means the color that you were drafting, and the percentage says what percentage of decks was that color in. So for example, you started, you were drafting a bit more Golgari in the first days. Here you have one of those transition periods where you were looking for solutions, I think, because like a lot of colors were in roughly 30-50% of the decks, which is something that you would be expecting in a perfectly balanced set. And you come out of this period full-blown Golgari, not even Abzan, but full-blown Golgari, where 80% of your decks were black and 80% of your decks were green. And at a certain moment, you start adding white to the mix, and you ended up in this Abzan stage, I would call it, probably. And then at the end, when you were recording those videos before going to Korea, most likely, You started being in your other chaotic kind of period where you were not sure what to do. And here you can see that, first of all, this is probably the moment when you tried to get the Demir decks online, and you can see a lot more blue being drafted. Does it make sense to how you see yourself playing this format?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. One thing I will note is, I think especially kind of towards the tail end of the format too, I was also just trying to lean towards other archetypes just to try different things for the sake of having fun and not necessarily always going for the cards that I would necessarily prefer. So let's say in my full-blown Abzan phase, I would always just take whatever the cards in those Abzan colors. Now, if I think it's a close pick, I think towards the tail end, I would lean towards maybe taking the blue uncommon over the black common removal spell, just because I wanted to try other archetypes.
Okay, so if I look at this graph, where on that graph did you realize that you cannot catch Aken because the volume of his games is just so much higher that it's impossible to take away the number one mythic from him?
So I basically, so I didn't actually know that there was because I'm still kind of new to this. I've only been doing the content creation game for about 5 months now. I didn't know that there was a leaderboard tab in 17 lands.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I was like, oh, I can actually see how much he's playing relative to how much I'm playing to see if this is even a realistic goal. And then once I looked at the numbers, I was like, oh, this is just completely unreasonable. He plays at least twice as much as I do, if not even more. And I'm looking at the top 10 list, and it's a bunch of great content creators, right? You have Lola, you have Kyle Rose, you have a bunch of these players, and they all play roughly the same number of games I do, maybe a little bit more. And then you have just Ekin, who just plays 2.5x more than everybody else.
To be fair, this is like the first time that he played so much of one format, and I don't know.
Oh, is it?
Maybe, yeah. It was not normally that high. He was actually known for having much higher win rate, but much lower volume than people like Lola. But
it's got to be my Road to Rank 1 series. It has to be. I think I say his name like every other video, just like, yep, it's Ekin again. It has to be.
And we determined that it's 4 people, no, didn't we?
Right. They have to be. Yeah.
But okay, this graph is on its own right interesting because especially I love to see those, and I usually see 2 of those periods in the format when I analyze like someone's as prolific data set, when there is this moment of okay, I have to figure out new things. The first one is usually, I literally want to figure out how the format operates, and this is where the ideas are being born. This also correlates very well with the fact that format evolves until 2 weeks most of the time in terms of the pick order. And if you look at the 17 lands data, after 2 weeks, the alpha for the cards stays relatively straight for all the cards. But the changes up and down happen all in the first 2 weeks. It's a bit weird because you would expect that there will be more dynamic later, but there's not much.
Okay.
It feels like there are, but it doesn't. And then usually there's the late stage change, but that's what you described. It's like, I want to do something different to feel something more kind of stage. Also good for content to do something different from time
Absolutely.
to time.
I mean, once you're in draft 40 or 50, just when you're doing these videos, it's just at some point people were also getting sick of the mono Abzan decks. So I mean, that's not to say I won't draft Abzan. Exactly. It's just whatever color combination I prefer in a given archetype. But given that I was just trying to spread my wings and do other things, especially once I knew that getting to rank 1 was just completely unattainable. So I think in MKM I got as close as rank 2, and so when I was there, I was obviously trying really, really hard to make sure I win as many matches as I can. But then if I'm in the top 10 or in the top 15, I just know that I have such a big mountain to climb. I just didn't really go for it.
Yeah, I have no idea how that can function. I mean, because your win rate is absurd, honestly, and I don't know how this one is not enough to get number 1. I don't know how you can.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Okay, but I think that the interesting part is to actually look at those 2 graphs that are perfectly synchronized. And first interesting thing is that actually your experimental phase at the beginning of the format was not detrimental towards your win rate. But I think that what you can see relatively clearly from here is that your switch from Golgari to Abzan was actually a bit detrimental. That's where the win rate dropped off. I don't think that at that stage you found a clear solution to the fact that Golgari was maybe drafted a bit too high, or maybe it's just this is the actual rest of the people catching up, and maybe not even catching up, but maybe the less invested players dropping off of the format, and at certain stage there is only grinders left and maybe an occasional adventurous amateur drafter, and you play against people who are absolute degenerates, and of course your win rate will have to suffer when you're playing only against super invested players. I actually didn't look at whether it correlates with your switching. No, actually it does. It was beginning, so you actually dropped down to platinum, which is weird. You had better win rates in Mythic at the end of the format than when you started in the Platinum.
Well, so one thing with that, by the way, is when I hit Platinum, I mean, if you ever watch the videos, I literally because I was in Platinum, I would say, we're in Platinum, I'm just going to do whatever right now. And I was actively just trying to do different things just because it's like, I'm just messing around in Platinum. In my mind, and obviously I paid the price for this. Oh, I'm in Platinum, I can probably just get away with whatever. So this is the time to mess around. Whereas if I'm in Mythic, I'm just playing against Mythic players. And that wasn't really the case because that's when the monthly reset happened. So all the other Mythic players were also Platinum. So I was still playing against good players, but I didn't draft like that was the case. And I think that's also probably
the illusion of Platinum.
So that's probably another reason why my win rate suffered. One other archetype, and we might get into this later, that I didn't quite figure out, despite it being one of the best archetypes, is Orzhov, Black-White. I just couldn't figure it out. And I feel like over the course of the format, I just felt like I didn't win quite as much with that color combination relative to the perceived power level when you look at the data on 17 lands.
You might regret those words in a second.
Oh, is that like my best archetype?
Right. So perfect.
What a follow-up. It's like I looked at these slides. I promise I didn't, but
no, actually, I kept you in the dark 100%. You saw only the starting slide.
Right.
So which color combinations were you the most successful and the least successful? We're going to start not with the win rates because that would be too easy. We're going to start with the popularity of the color pairs. And I think that you know perfectly well which two color combinations you played the most.
Yep.
And green, you black, don't even white. Have to guess because we saw that clearly on the last graph.
Right.
So it's, well, obviously it is Golgari and Selesnya.
Yep.
And by quite a lot. I only look at the two color combinations, by the way, but they do include two color decks with splashes, which in 17 lenses defined as under 3 cards of the extra color, but it can be 2 cards of multiple colors. With you can have a 5 color deck that has a couple of splashes here and there. But this covers probably like a good 70% of all your data, the 2 color combinations, so it's enough for our purposes. But yeah, you played 140 games with Golgari, 110 with Selesnya, and then 72 with Blue-Black. So when we add those up, that's around 320-ish. That's out of 583 games that you played. So that's something like 60% already of your whole games. And then with adding the other ones, you go probably more than 80% of all the games were in the 2 color combinations. You played some Rakdos, you played some Boros, but it's like in the 50s, 40s.
Yeah.
There is the Orzhov, only 39 games. And then you played almost no Gruul, which hurts me because that was my favorite archetype. And also my most winningest one.
Oh yeah, you just got all the sure shots, like 8th pick.
I played 4 Gruul drafts and I lost 5 games in those 4 drafts. Yeah,
nice.
And honestly, I think my secret card was the card that you played only once because I checked, and it was the Gold Pan.
The Gold Pan.
It was because the secret for Gruul was that all your creatures had 3 power and you needed to make them 4 power.
I see.
And it worked very well, and it also ramped you to the later things that could have 4 power and stuff like that. It worked very well for me. But I digress. And you almost basically never played Is It? And you mentioned that you didn't want to play. Here, the irony, of course, is that across OTJ, we were matched up once on Arena, and obviously I played Is It, and I got thrashed.
It's a trap.
It is a trap, but I had to try it because I thought, oh, come on, I have to try it at least once. And I drafted it once.
And look, I did it once too, and clearly I didn't get a trophy.
No, you got 2-3.
There you go.
Which for you is double painful.
Yeah,
that's so much off brand. And I assume you 3 times opened Bonipal.
Yep, that's got to be why else would I be blue? So
what put you into white blue?
I think early on I just wanted to try it. I think I had a couple of drafts where I opened I don't know, maybe it was like Archive Trap or something like that, and then I just wanted to draft kind of a blue-based control deck with lockpickers and Archive Traps, and then I just ended up pairing that with white. I wanted to pair it with black just because black has the better removal, but I think just the way the cards fell, I just ended up in blue-white.
No, 32 games. That means either you were very good with it or you actually were successful and played a couple of drafts, maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, I had a few at the end that actually did better than I expected.
I think white-blue could have been good, but it required splashes for early interactions. I looked through the data, and it actually came to me that the reason white-blue was not good is that it survived till the long game quite well, but you got there in too bad a state. And then, it's very easy to dive when you have deserts in opponents' decks. If you stabilize on 2-3 life, you can never feel safe. And I think that the key for making blue-white deck was splashing Desert Dews and maybe like the red cheap removal spell or something like that.
Yeah, that's possible.
So let's look at the win rates, and I kept the same order by the popularity. So if we can see if the most played archetypes had the highest win rate. But
all right.
I mean, you could have.
I was so wrong.
You could have expected that it's going to happen when I told you that you might regret this. First of all, I think it's good to say that you were in 8 out of 10 archetypes. You were pretty solid in terms of it's very even. The differences in win rate are very small. You were equally good with all of those things, and I'm not going to say that all of them were equally good as archetypes, because clearly the selection process here for you was that one of them you could almost force every single draft, and some of them only came together once in a blue moon. Mm-hmm. But once you identify that you can draft like Simic or Gruul, you had good results with it. With blue-red, the sample size is so pathetically small that we cannot really say anything. But blue-white is slightly below your levels. And again, still small numbers. But I would say this is super impressive that you get like 71 to 68% win rates across board, with that Orzhov being slightly higher. Again, small sample size, but it's funny that you said that you never could figure it out.
I had a deck that had a bunch of rares, and I went 0-3, and maybe that's kind of maybe that's not in the sample size or whatever, or
maybe it was counted as Abzan, or no Abzan, but what is the Esper? Maybe it counted as Esper.
It's possible, but this is actually pretty surprising. And I'm actually I knew I did well with Abzan, and I guess maybe that makes sense. It just makes sense that I continue going down that path. So having a win rate that high, while also I guess almost basically forcing it, is pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. But now we can say you have a tagline: Paul Cheon, I didn't figure out that archetype. It was pathetic for me. Win rate 79.5.
There you go.
I think Orzhov was generally underestimated all through the format. So now we can move to the individual cards, and I will show 2 card win rates. One of them is the games played win rate, and that means that it's the win rate whenever the card was in your deck.
Okay.
And this is more for fun. It's interesting to see. But the impact of games that you never drew the given card on the win rate is quite high. So here we're going to see more of the impact of the archetypes and how you like to build them than anything else. And I think that weirdly also in those kind of analysis, it's more interesting to look at the cards with low win rate than with high win rate. We're going to look at both. Your top 15 cards in each of those win rate categories. and bottom 15 cards of those categories. And we're going to first look at the games played, then we're going to move to game in hand win rate, which is whenever you drew the card in one way or another.
Okay.
So what do you think are your highest win rate cards when you had them in your deck? And we're talking about some reasonable sample size. I think that's 40 games or more. So
I mean,
it will be. There'll be
yeah.
some rares in there, but not many, and mostly commons
Yeah.
and uncommons.
Yeah, it's gotta, for me, I feel like it's probably gonna be the uncommon enchantment-based Oblivion Ring effects. I think those are probably gonna be high, particularly Lassoed and the Buried in the Garden. Although I don't know if you get Buried in the Garden at the same rate as other uncommons, because it's one of those
It's more or less the
cards.
same.
Okay. I would say those, and then maybe the Spinewood's Armadillo. I really love that card. And I draft Golgari all the time, and it's just really, really good in that deck. So maybe those cards.
Okay, let's look at the cards that I have to switch between windows. Sorry.
No problems.
Vladimir New Blood was actually your highest win rate card when you had it in your
What?
deck, and I think that this is partially the secret of your Orzhov decks that had it in them.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
80% of the games when you had Vladimir in your deck, you won 80% of your games. But the second place Heart Bristle Bandit of 79.6 is also equally impressive.
Okay.
This is a narrow thing.
Right.
And we're talking about 40 games, and we're talking about high impact of other cards on your deck.
Yeah.
Interesting thing for me, Mind Raider. I think that you put it in your deck in very specific scenarios, and
Black red usually. Yeah.
And these were probably decent then. Same with Rictus Robber, and I think it's a similar scenario when you played robbers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Weird card here, Stagecoach Security had pretty decent results when it was in your deck. Of course, again, impact of other cards and games when you never drew the card is going to be high in those. But I always like to look at this data because I want to see cards that are high both when they were in the deck and when you drew them, because that will tell me something more about cards that not only were good when I had them in the deck, but also were good when I drew them in a way, when you see much of a bigger impact of the card that you draw. There's a first time we see red cards here because there's Skewer the Critics, there's the Gila Courser. Oh, that's enough. That's still probably 3 cards more than we've seen all the evening.
Yeah, that's really interesting that they show up here.
Yeah, Gila Courser, another Gruul's staple.
4 power.
More often.
4 power. You don't even need the pan for that one.
You don't need the pan, no. Badlands Revival is in there. I think that your Golgari decks were significantly better when you had it, because that means you had a plan. You probably had also Armadillo inside once you had the Badlands Revival. Because,
oh, yes. You better believe it.
Of course, the Ambush Gigapede. Finally,
that one took a little time for me as well. At first, I was just like, man, this thing costs 6 mana. It's a small body, but yeah, it did a lot of work. There's just oftentimes you can kill things, you 2 for 1, and just the fact that there's just so much recursion, just getting it back in the late game too. Just you can just 2 for 1 your opponents out. I
was on it pre-day 1 because I had a good experience with similar cards from one of the previous sets where there was the -2/-2 thing with Flash, and was actually surprisingly good.
Was it in one of the Theros sets? Maybe I'm not sure.
I think in LCI there was the one with Discover or something.
Oh, okay. That
was slightly different, but there was something else that. But generally, I described it in my set review as the budget version of Back for More. And when you think about it, it's not far. It kills something smaller, and
I mean, yeah, but like
a budget version.
All right. I'll give you budget version, sure. Getting back like a Spinewoods Paladin or a Cactarantula is just so devastating, though. But yes, I get what you're saying. And the really nice thing about that card specifically is just you never have to take it early. It's one of those cards that you just get 7th or 8th pick, but it's one of those where you're also happy having it in your deck. So it's just kind of this weird dynamic. It's like a high win rate card that you also can just not have to take early.
Yeah, and that was such a comforting thing. And like late game, you play 1, you chump something, you kill something, you play Mourner's Surprise, and then they have to do it all over again. And at certain stage, it just turns the corner and it slams for 6 when you're not
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they have to block. So
And a bunch of lands. Bucolic Ranch. That was my biggest fail in this format.
I love that land.
My first episode, I was literally mocking it, and then I had to apologize for it very soon. Actually, later I found that it was one of the better cards in Dimir decks.
I mean, yeah, I had a draft where I was just straight Golgari, but think I had like 4 Hard Bristle Bandits in it, and maybe 2 or 3 mounts, and my mana was so good. I just played 2 of them in my deck, and they were great. I just had so much mana laying around. It just helped me get whatever I needed.
And you have a green blade to fetch it most of the time.
Right.
So,
yeah. Or an Armadillo or Dance of the Tumbleweeds. There's just lots of ways to that first copy of Bucolic Ranch, especially in a white-green mount deck, is really, really valuable.
And Loan Shark, decks with Loan Sharks were good for you for some reason.
I mean, it's a 3/4 that draws you a card, I guess.
In your case, probably 100% of the time draws a card.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather die than just play that as a 4-mana 3/4.
A man of principles.
That's right. That's me. We've already gone back before. I have discipline. Okay, I will stick to my guns here.
And I think that in this particular case, that discipline is very good because it's better to lose a game than to play out a 3/4 vanilla for 4.
Yeah, you're gonna lose that game 70% of the time, anyways.
Exactly. Yeah. So, what were the cards you played with the worst win rate when they were in your deck? And
that's interesting.
Obviously, we're talking about the cards that you played several times, so it's not going to be like something that was one off and you lost a bunch of games. And here you might have some of the sad moments of realization.
I don't know. Maybe Phantom Interference. Let's see. I mean, I just feel like it's going to be just mostly blue cards. Jailbreak Scheme, maybe. And let's go with I don't know, Fake Your Own Death.
Okay, let's go. I don't think that Fake Your Own Death made the list of being played often enough.
Oh, fair enough.
Number last, Plan the Heist at 59.2.
Dang, no, but I just like drawing cards too much.
Yeah, and then because Irascible Wolverine is there, that sort of draws a card. But Cactarantula is there at
wow, that's
pretty
low.
much close to the bottom. Okay. Of other mentions, Back for More, actually. Remember? Where is the... Where is the Gigapede? 76.
Yeah.
Back for More, 63% when it was in your deck.
Oh, interesting.
I think that you were playing this card a lot, Free Strider Commando, and I didn't have extremely good results.
I was higher on it when the set came out. I thought that the flexibility in being able to have something on 3 and then a 5/5 on 4 potentially was good enough.
Plus
but
recursion, I mean, it always comes back as a 5/5.
Yeah, but I think just it ultimately just ended up actually being pretty bad, which was a little bit surprising to me. So I think I just played it a little too much in the beginning, and then I just kind of stopped playing it unless I didn't have more options.
Would be interesting to plot the frequency of you playing a card across time as well.
Right.
The problem with it is that there will be so little data about it because I would have to look at only drafts, not on.
Man, that Plan the Heist is brutal.
Yeah, I think Lazav is also there as a bit of a surprise. Caustic Bronco,
Fortune is normally pretty awesome.
Sphinx and Dirge.
Okay.
Another 2 card. Bristlepack Sentry. That's the 3/3.
Yeah, I played that a decent amount, but I don't put it. I guess I don't draft Gruul enough. It's probably a lot better in Gruul.
I mean, it's not so good without the Goldman.
That's right.
Yeah, just jam it on the Sentry, and you have a 4/4 naturally.
Yeah. Fierce Retribution makes sense. I felt like I was higher on that card. Once again, another card kind of like the Commando, where I'm like, oh, it's flexible enough, but it just in practice it ended up playing out a little bit worse for me.
Now, of course, keep in mind that here we're still talking about the game played when the card was in the deck, which is slightly misleading. And still, the rock bottom is 63% win rate, which is nothing to cry for. For example, if you played the card much more in the second half of your format, that would be closer to your average win rate because you had like around 65 for that period. It's the first weeks that you had the win rate of 75-80%. So that might play a role if you change the preferences for the card and you played more of it in the second half of the format, for example.
Right.
Which I think is the case with Plan de Heist, as I'm sure that you didn't play it a lot in the first weeks.
No, I didn't think it was that great. But then as the format kind of matured, I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot. I feel like maybe I can draft these controlling decks with a bunch of Desert Stews and Plan to Heists and see if I can win that way.
Snakeskin Veil, at least, you avoid this card and you play it less than your average Magic player.
Yes.
And turns out you probably were right, because it doesn't suit your gameplay in one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a lot. The thing is, I don't really like it very much in black-green in general, just because that's kind of more of a mid-range strategy that's trying to grind out your opponents. And I don't care that much if my creatures die, right? Because you can just get it back. And the one thing is, especially in the Golgari decks, there's just only so many slots you can play for spells, right? You want to play like 14 or 15 creatures, and then you're with the fact that the format just required you to play against so many different bombs, you need a lot of removal spells, right? So I would be happy if I had 5 or 6 removal spells, maybe even 7, whatever. And then black-green is also really good at recursion, right? So you need to have a slot for a Mourner Surprise or a Back for More, which means there's just not that much room in your deck for combat tricks. And so that's kind of why I just never put a high priority on it, because it's like I would take removal spells, I would take quality creatures, I would take the Back for Mores or what have you, and I just never found that perfect time to take the Snakeskin Veil. And then in green-white, Snakeskin Veil is kind of close enough to take up the shield anyways. So I didn't put that much of an emphasis on it, because I can usually pick up between the 2 cards 1 or 2 copies of that card if I needed.
Yeah, while in Gruul, of course, it brings your 3-power creature to 4, which is
it's
great.
amazing in Gruul, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I do agree. Like I looked at the data for Selesnya, and Take Up the Shield was slightly surprising to me, but was a way better card. It was not only slightly better; it was way better in terms of the results it was achieving. I think that the life was so much more important. And in the end, when you played against good players, they played around your protection spell. So neither of them were giving enough protection.
And that's the thing too. It's just obviously it's annoying, but just once you know what the combat tricks are, it just makes them a lot worse. I think, and maybe that's a thing for combat tricks in general. Obviously, you've done a lot more breakdowns of these types of things in all the other sets. I feel like I don't know if you've ever done how effective are combat tricks relative to the ranks, right? And do they get better or worse as you kind of go up in the ranks? Also, it has to be kind of, I would love to see like how good are combat tricks when a mythic player plays against another mythic player, right? Because my combat tricks are way better when I play against diamond players, right? Than when I play against
in gold. It always works in gold.
Yeah, exactly. You'll always blow people out. Your opponents are gonna sorcery speed their consuming ashes into your 1 green mana. You're gonna counter it, and then you're just gonna beat them or whatever.
Yep, I remember like playing in silver and gold in Ikoria. Sudden Spinnerets is just 1 mana blood curdle. So
exactly.
Okay, so now we go to the game in hand, and this one has much more weight on the card itself and much less weight on the deck, because normally you will draw a card roughly 40 to 50% of the games that you play it in your deck. So we remove all the ones that don't have any kind of impact of that card on the win rate. We only leave the games where that card was at least drawn. We don't know if it was played, but we know it was drawn, and and most of them probably was played or was not needed, which is also fine. But yeah, the weight of the card's individual power is much higher in those numbers. So what do you think were the most successful cards when you drew them? And we're looking from the same kind of subset of cards.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's a common answer, but I'm going to go Lassoed by the Law. I mean, this has to be some combination of cards I've played a lot and also done well with, or is it just any card that I just have a high win rate?
You had to play it a lot. You had to play it at least, I think, either 40 or 50 games. I think 40 games were played with that card in the deck.
Okay.
Because I took the same data and I just...
Yeah, Lassoed by the Law. Maybe Vault Plunderer. Maybe that just goes in too many decks where it can't be high enough. And then kind of the same things that we've seen before. Consuming Ashes, I also put a pretty high priority on. Maybe Ruthless Lawbringer. I don't know if I played with it enough though.
Okay, let's take a look. I think 0 of the mentioned cards were there.
Oh my gosh,
That
this is hard.
You won 90% of your games when you drew Frontier Seeker.
Frontier Seeker, really?
Yep. It's a good card.
Yeah, I guess I just never missed.
It just goes like slightly under the radar. Well, if you never missed, it's just a testament to your deck building, isn't it?
Oh, there you go. There you go. I would play this, and then I would play the Rambling Possum, and then just you know what I mean. I would get value.
Yeah,
there,
yeah. Oh no, love that. Weirdly skewer the critics 90% of the time that you drew it, you won.
I didn't play that card very often. Like I just don't play red that often in general, but I guess it was good in my decks. Yeah.
Festering Gulch. Turns out when you draw it, it's great.
Yeah.
Vladimir, that card was already highest on the list of the cards when you put it in your deck, but when you draw it, it's even better. So you got the Vladimir's number, and I think that part of it is that I tried to play Vladimir a couple of times, and it never worked out just exactly how I wanted it to be. But I think that you combining Vladimir and recursion, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, it's possible. I feel like I've never actually gotten Vadmir to, I don't think I've actually ever lived the dream with Vadmir with the lifelink, but I guess
but do you have to?
It's still just, I guess, yeah, if it's just a 4/4 for 2 mana, it's probably just good enough.
Yeah. Did you live the dream of Miriam?
Oh, many times. Many times. You just play Miriam and you win the game. Yeah,
this is
the
moment when Snakeskin Veil is nice, when you play this Miriam on turn 2 and you know that it's safe and you're good, and your trained Arix gets home.
Yeah.
Or Mobile Homestead also.
Miriam is fantastic. Yeah, Mobile Homestead is probably a card that I've undervalued, where I think the card's fine, but I just don't take it high enough, maybe.
I do like it in the Steed deck as a sort of like a budget Arix. I mean,
my opponents always hit.
Like,
does it seem like your opponents always hit? One time my opponent attacked me 3 times and put 3 lands in. I'm just like, okay, maybe I should respect this more.
Did you see Javier Dominguez on the Pro Tour?
What happened?
I just played the Homestead and just like attacked 4 times and hit 4 times.
Yeah, and wasn't he just playing it was like a Rakdos deck or something, right?
I think Boros.
Oh, Boros. Okay, it was Fair enough.
Whatever. I mean,
I mean,
when you got it, you got it. Outcaster Greenblade on that list does not surprise.
Not surprising. Mythic uncommon.
And it's also one of those cards that does promote better players. And I think we agreed you are a better player, because the breadth of choice it gives, not only when you play it, but when you build your deck. Like what you said, I just put some bucolic ranches even though I didn't have steeds, because I have Greenblade and I can always tutor for it when I need it. And It gives me this toolbox kind of situation. This is the thing that determines from being, okay player to being above okay to being great. What is your range with a card like this? Because everyone can play Bonipal and everyone can play Voltborn Tyrant. But playing Outcaster Greenblade to perfection is not trivial, because you have to know when to pick a basic, you have to know when to pick a pink desert, you have to know when to pick the Surveil desert, or maybe some kind of a utility land.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance, because I feel like there are a lot of instances where people go too far in the other direction and they treat OTJ draft like it's cube draft, and they're like, oh, I see a land, I'm going to take it, and then I'm going to play all my cool spells. And I've ranted many, many times about this too, where people just have no respect for their mana base. Everything comes into play tapped. They still don't have enough sources, and they somehow get there against me, but I'm just positive they didn't trophy, just because when I'm looking at the spells that they're casting and their mana base, I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. What are you doing? And I think I've tried to generally stay more disciplined with my mana base in general. I try to go for light splashes, unless obviously if you're a green base, you can do the splashing, but even then I just try my best not to go 4 or 5 colors if I can help it. It's not free, people. It's like there's a real cost here. You can't just say I have this conduit pylons and I'm good, right? It's not just a mana confluence. So I think that might be another thing where maybe people were still exploring the format and trying to be a little greedier with their mana base. And I think more often than not, that's going to cost you wins than help.
I'm not going to say anything about my Bonipal Rakdos fractured identity.
I bet it was sweet. I'm sure the mana was probably a little bit suspect, and I'm sure you
No,
got there.
the mana was weirdly not suspect because
Okay.
I didn't splash it from deserts. If I tried to splash it via deserts, it would be a nightmare and it would be ending in a disaster.
Okay.
I had 2 conduit pylons and I had like 7 sources of treasures. And
Oh, okay.
apart from that, every single other card in my deck was red green.
Okay.
So I only had
Yeah.
5 bombs that were widely of color, super powerful and super high impact, but the splashing was done by treasure rather than by
Yeah.
lands. Because I think that this is a trap that people try to make 5-color decks with deserts, and deserts are not for 5-color decks; they are for three colors.
Three-color decks.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
But let's look at the further cards. Phantom Interference is an interesting one because you mentioned lamented this card several times. But actually, when you draw it, you get 81% win rate.
I guess people like running their cards into my my Phantom Interference.
Maybe it's just platinum people.
Yeah, it must be. It must be. I mean, the card's fine. I guess every time your opponent either plays around it or just exiles the card or whatever, you just like, oh, what am I doing with my life? I guess I'm going to play a 2/2 flyer, and those moments just really hit hard, and maybe that's what's kind of clouding my memory on the card.
Yeah, and often you probably will get people, and so many times I just played into Phantom Interference, and they didn't have it, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting away with murder here. But
Yeah. Every time they leave mana up, I'm like, all right. I mean, I don't have any other play, so I have to play this card. But even though I think there's a 50% chance they're going to counter it, and then when they don't have it, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And then it's just
it
over.
Feels great.
Yeah.
Betrayal at the Vault. What was your? That card was not bad actually when you think about it. Like in the end.
No. I mean that card was completely fine. I mean, it was a nice little top end card. It's like the green uncommon ambush gigapede. It obviously it works a little bit better too if you have. There are many times I just comboed this with like ankle biter or something, right? And or the 2 mana servant of the stinger to be able to just kill anything that you want. But I just found that oftentimes you'd be able to avoid getting completely blown out. Just I don't know. I just felt like more often than not, I didn't just sit with this in my hand and was not able to pull it off.
For me, it was the card for the open when in the sealed part, I was not once, but several times, I was sitting there and said, well, I guess I win this game unless they have Betrayal at the Vault. Of course, you know what happens when you say something like that. Yeah. Badlands Revival, I guess weirdly performed better for you than Back for More. And I think that is it moment to evaluate that actually it is a better card than Back for More?
I personally think that it is. I think the thing is with Badlands Revival, you also have to remember that it can get back permanents. And so you can get back a mystical tether that died or whatever out of your graveyard, which is relevant. Also, I've had decks where I have Back for More, but my creatures just aren't that big. So, you know, if you don't have like 3 Cactarantulas or a bunch of ginormous creatures in your graveyard, then oftentimes you're going to put a 3/3 into play and you might not even be able to fight something, which means you don't get the 2-for-1, in which case it's just a 6 mana way to get something back. Whereas Badlands Revival is just always a 2-for-1, right? And it's 1 cheaper. So
I had a deck when I caught Back for More for Mourner's Surprise because I realized that my best target for Back for More is the Gigapede, and I'd rather Mourner's Surprise the Gigapede than to Back for More it because it fights anything, it dies. So I'd rather bring it back to the board and have a 1/1 spare.
I just think I mean, obviously the ceiling is super high. You get to turn your big monster into and kill a giant beaver or something like that. But I think there are just enough instances where it's like a 6 mana removal spell where, I mean, it's fine, but I don't think it's as good as Badlands Revival.
I think that it's a function of how many armadillos do you have in your deck.
I mean, yes, if you have Armadillo, you obviously take it higher because that's such a nice combination. But the thing is, I mean, even then, Badlands Revival is still
it's not terrible at all. Getting it at 5 mana when your opponent will not even have physical possibility of killing it because they don't have the ward mana, it's not terrible.
Ever reanimate one? I got to do that. That was nice.
I was close to, but I was at 5 life when I could have done it. So that was a bit.
I had a game. It was one of my last draft videos where I don't even know if this was good, but I guess I kept a one lander and I was on the draw and I had a hostile investigator. So I just discarded it turn one, and then turn two and then just reanimated it into play. It ended up working out, but yeah, reanimate is a sweet one for sure.
These are the plays from like late 90s, not from modern days.
Hey, it worked. It worked, but yes, I wouldn't normally advise people to not hit their land drops.
Be responsible.
Be
Turn
responsible.
One, discard the card size, the hand size.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to the most sadder part of which cards were not winning even when you drew them.
I guess plan the heist would be one of my guesses.
Oh, wise man.
Yeah.
Learning from the previous slides.
It's I try. Which cards were not winning even when I drew them? Maybe. Oh, I need to play these a significant amount too, right? Because like Gem Lightfoot might be a card that I don't think I win with that often.
No, it's not on the list. Probably was not played enough.
Yeah.
There is one card that is an absolute outlier, and it's black actually.
And it's black. Is it Mourner Surprise?
Close, but no.
Oh, close, but no. Lively Dirge. All right. We got
but
that
let's look at the list. Maybe that will be easier. But Lively Dirge, you only won 33% of the games when you had it in hand.
Whew. That's
and again,
brutal.
Small sample size. It can be just pure variance.
Yeah.
But the fact that you were guessing Mourner's Surprise is a bit telling, maybe.
Yeah.
Mana Drain, for some reason, you had enough of the times in the format.
I did draft it highly. It ended up being just okay. But I mean, obviously the ceiling is incredible. I've just lost when my opponents just mana drain something and play something huge. But yeah, a lot of this kind of makes sense, minus the Fortune. I don't know why I can just never win with Fortune, but
I think the Fortune is not generally that great.
Yeah,
I would
maybe
prefer the Drover Grizzly most of the time over the Fortune, because you're doing the thing that you don't want to do. You're doing the dirty blinkety blink stuff, and that's
yeah. I think it's kind of like a possum, but
it's also easy to
a lot easier to block. Yeah,
you block on 2 2/2s and it just gets eaten for a 2/2. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And then all these other cards. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a reason why I didn't take the Snakeskin Veil very high. And the Irascible Wolverine is definitely a card that definitely continued. I think I had it a little higher at the beginning, and then it just kept kind of going down and down and down. It's not 3 mana. It's not a Vault Plunderer. I'll tell you that much.
My big surprise is just general bad performance of Cactarantula in your hands, and I don't know if that's.
It's not a hard card to play with.
Yeah, no, just
it's not a hard. It's not a hard card to play with, right? You just play it, and then things happen. But it is weird that my win rate with that one was not as high as some of the other green creatures.
And you were so much better with Dance of the Tumbleweeds, which is a similar card when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, Dance is definitely a card that just that one's a pretty crazy one. That one's like over time, it's one of those cards you would get with 5 cards left in the first week or whatever. And then towards the end, you just stop seeing it because everybody's just trying to do all the desert multicolor thing. And just you play it turn 6 and you get a 7/7 and another land. I mean, the card has just been really, really good. And yeah, I don't think it's actually I'm actually curious what you're supposed to take between the two. Whereas week 1, it wasn't close.
I had that moment when I just decided actually it's the Dance. And it was an epiphany for me, like about 1 second realization that why am I picking a Cactarantula when I have the Dance? And I didn't have a good answer because Cactarantula the Dance can ramp me to 5 mana if I really need to, or can bring an 8/8, or can bring a big creature and will draw me a card.
Did you lose me? Oh, you might have some internet thing. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you kind of flickered out. It might have been me on my end.
Okay. So yeah, there was this moment that it's just such a more flexible card, and it's just better enough of the time that I probably should pick it.
Yeah, I remember week 1 that everybody was just in love with the Cactarantula, right? They were just like, "Oh my gosh, 5 mana 6/5 draws you a card. This card is absolutely absurd."
Yeah, the reach part is, as chat noticed, the reach part is important difference, but You know what's the best reach? That they cannot attack with the flyer because they have to keep it for chump blocking your 8/8.
Exactly.
Okay. That's it in terms of the data, and I just have the time for conclusions. And obviously, this is going to be your conclusions because what I conclusions. So yeah, just wanted to ask you, how do you find such an introspective of your format in terms of, because I know that it can be informative, but it also can make you feel uncomfortable because you have to challenge your personal feelings about the format with the actual data, and I know that
Yeah.
it can't be like super nice because I know what happens when I notice that a card I thought I was really doing well with, I did actually
Yeah.
rubbish, which happened in this format as well. So
Yeah, I think at least for this format, I don't know that there were too many crazy surprises. I know some of the numbers that we just looked at were kind of more on the lower sample size end of the spectrum, but I think I was pretty aware of the color combinations that wasn't working for me. Well, apparently I wasn't because of the black white thing, but I just knew that I just wasn't doing that well with the blue decks, and then that kind of panned out that way, and then I just kind of actively stayed away. I would be really interested in looking at this data again, in especially in a format that's a little more maybe balanced, where I play there's a better spread in terms of what archetypes I play, and then I think that would give me a better understanding of what works for me and what doesn't. Whereas in this one, like I pretty clearly had my lane that I liked, and then obviously you twist my arm and something's very open, then I'll shift into those other archetypes, and then I would make it work because the only times I play those archetypes when it's very open, right? I'm not if I were to force Demeter, I'm sure my win rate wouldn't be as high, right? But the fact that I would only play it when I am getting Lockpicker's 7th pick, I am getting a 5th pick Marauding Sphinx, and then kind of moving into it that way meant that I would just end up in a deck that would just have all the premium uncommons because I recognize that those colors were open.
I think that in general, the consistency of your win rate that is based on how you modulated how much you draft different color combinations is even more impressive than the actual win rate, which is already impressive. Because you got like basically dead 70% on every archetype, barring blue white, and never drafted is it, and weirdly successful but somehow inconspicuous Orzo. So yeah, I mean this was pretty impressive. Of course, if you ever want to have another episode like that, you're more than welcome. I can always get the data out, and we can have that repeated, and then you will know all the stuff, and knowing you do the actual research, and it will spoil all the fun.
No, I won't, but just wait till I get another 70% win rate set, and then
yeah.
we
Well,
can
I
just
mean,
talk about how awesome I am.
we can always schedule it with a week of advance, so that's fine, as long as I can
Yeah.
figure out the way of getting the data from 70.
Hey, I'm running super hot right now. Let's go over all my data.
Well, of course, I had one episode when I had I always arrange it before the format starts to avoid that kind of refusal based on the win rate. But I had to once do some analysis of someone who had a really bad format for their standards, and it was interesting but tough to
but
do.
I think you could learn a lot from that, right? I'm sure that person learned a lot. They were just probably forcing, or they were just doing things, and I think they can certainly get a lot out of looking at those numbers.
You don't learn much from a format that you figured out very quickly.
Right.
Although you still can learn things, like for
course.
example, this dip in the win rate. I think that might be something that you might want to look into.
Yeah,
Obviously, I'll send you the slide link.
I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one. You have those nights where you just like think you have a good deck and you 1-3, and then you go 2-3 again. You're like, what is going on? I better try some wildly different things here to try to learn how to do the other things. And during that journey, you just go 3-3, 4-3, 3-3, and your just win rate just tanks, right?
Yeah,
but then
you learn my every night,
right? But then you learn, right? You learn. You're like, okay, I drafted this blue-red deck, and clearly this thing doesn't work. Maybe I need to draft it a little more aggressive, a little more tempo-y, and then make the adjustment, and then that sets you up for the future. So you have that week or 3-day period where you start losing a bunch, but then you start figuring things out, but then that sets you up better for the future drafts, right? And then the win rate goes hopefully in the right direction, unless you just perpetually tilt off from that point.
Okay. Last question is which of those data sets or analysis that we talked through over the episode, do you think you will find most useful as a 17 lens user? And I know that you're not a super intensive 17 lens user,
Yeah.
but thanks for providing the data. That's very valuable for everyone else. But which ones would you think might be interesting to see?
I mean, as far as the ones that you mean something that we haven't seen, or
No, from the ones that we were discussing
from the
today.
ones that I saw, I really liked seeing the information on cards that it looks like I undervalue relative to other people, particularly if they're cards that do see play. For example, like we talked about the Snakeskin Veil thing, but if there was something that I wasn't that I didn't even recognize, where I'm just like, wow, everybody thinks this card's way better than this other card, because I don't necessarily go on all the different streams and see how what everybody else is doing. I just kind of just draft my own way. And then also diving into the archetypes that I seem to be doing poorly with, because I don't actually take a look at that stuff. I just look at I look at kind of overall win rate and then just kind of go from there. But I haven't really spent the time to kind of break down how I do with all the different archetypes. And then let's say I'm doing poorly with a certain color combination, and it seems to be a color combination that other people are doing well with, then I would be interested in figuring out what I'm doing wrong, right? So that I think would also be pretty interesting. All the stuff where I'm doing something, where it feels like I'm doing something wrong, those are the ones where I can use that information and improve. Those are the places where I would be interested in. Not the, hey, you won a bunch with Golgari. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm not going to learn anything out of that, right? It's like, okay, well, it looks like you're kind of stinky with red white. Like, what are you doing? It's like, well, I don't know. I'm just trying to curve out here. It's like, well, you're not taking tricks highly enough. It's like, okay, well, maybe I should be doing that. Those would be nice things to see.
Yeah, these are sometimes tough to make based on the individual, because
right.
Even though you're complaining about how little you play compared to Aken, it's still quite a lot.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, this is my job, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's I create limited content for a living, so I would hope to at least get some amount of
But
games.
I still average
don't,
player might have too small sample size to come to those kind of conclusions. But for the whales, in terms of the volume of games that we play,
yeah,
it might be a very useful thing. It's just harder to apply. One last thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess your mulligan rate?
Guess my mulligan rate? Okay. Yeah. Could you tell me what the average is?
Average is around 11% in best of one.
Okay. I will say 9%.
6.
I'm an old school player, man. I don't like to mulligan.
You mulligan 36 times in 583 games.
Man. Oh man, that is pretty low, I guess.
And I don't even know if it's 36 mulligans in 36 games, or maybe sometimes you went down to 5.
What do you know? What's Eakin's mulligan rate?
No, I only can get the individual data from the people that will record with me.
Wow, that is a big gap. Okay. Maybe I need to...
I just quickly checked it right now because I didn't put it in the slide, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. But actually, there is a correlation between the win rate and the never mulliganing. So you're doing the right thing, I think.
Is it good to mulligan less?
Yeah, I think optimum should be around 7% from what I calculated. And
there you go.
In best of one. And it should go up to like 12% in best of 3. Because that shows that like I calculated the theoretical 7% mulligan rate based on you build the decks optimal, and if you build decks optimal, you have to mulligan less, and you also are a bit more adventurous with keeping 2 landers than some people who are maybe more.
I mean, yeah, 2 landers on the draw is just 2 landers on the draw is just a snap keep, right? You're just like never ever throwing that away. But 2 landers on the play are a little bit dicey. But if I have plays, then I'll keep. But I try to give myself, when it's a close hand, I try to give myself reasons to keep. And then if I feel like there are enough, then I will keep. So I guess maybe that explains also why it's a little bit lower.
Okay, well, I mean, thank you for the appearance. It was, I think, one of the better episodes I had the pleasure of participating in, because you know how amazing it is for me, a complete amateur, to work with a professional caster that can lead me, even though I'm technically running the conversation. It's very comfortable and very warm and cushy feeling in my heart, because anything I chuck at you, I know I'm going to get back pure professionalism. So thank you very much. Obviously, as this comes to an end, I will ask you if you have anything to plug or anything that you want people to know about your future plans.
Sure. Yeah. So my main place where I create content is not really through streaming anymore. It's kind of basically through my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@Haumph. So if you want to catch basically me playing daily limited videos, that's kind of the best place to be. And kind of my thing is I'm going to try hard my way into getting to rank 1. It's the Road to Rank 1 series. But of course, with the end game, Ekin playing triple my games, maybe that's never going to be a thing. But heck, we'll go for number 2 if that's the case. Outside of that, I have a Twitter, twitter.com/@Haumph as well. And I guess those are kind of 2 of the biggest things. And then occasionally I'll stream on Twitch, which is also not hard to figure out, twitch.tv/Haumph.
You see, that's you're taking my strategy. The nickname is hard to pronounce and spell, but at least it's consistent. Of course, I will put your socials in the description on YouTube and in podcast when I release them in those forms. So you can actually go to the description and find it if you're listening in the future. For you in the present, just Google it, damn it. It should be in my tweets that I advertise the podcast with, so that's fine. And from my side, I would, of course, like to thank 17 Lands team because they had to actually take an additional time to extract Paul's data. So thank you very much, Viral Misnomer, for doing that for me. Viral Misnomer is, of course, the person that is responsible for creating the 17 Lands. Also, thanks to Ale Ballini, who is currently on the operational side of the 17 Lands and is struggling with trying to make the MH3 logs to work after the early streamer event. So hopefully it will start without a miss, as it always does. But what we don't know is that it starts so well and it never has any glitches because Ale is spending ungodly amount of time to make it work. And thanks to Fake Jake Brown, who is my secret elf helper for releasing this in the podcast form and is currently on holiday, which might mean you will hear it in a couple of days in the podcast form. But with all that, thank you, Paul, for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, anytime you have a good format and you want to brag, but in a discreet way, just send me a message and we can.
Well, but now the secret's out, right? When I come out, it's gonna just be like,
point.
oh, okay, well, that guy definitely wants to flex today.
We'll find, but I mean, maybe 70% was your low.
We'll see.
We don't know that. We don't know that. Maybe we got you in your worst format ever. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for dedicating your time to that. Congratulations on your upcoming Lemmy for the best guest star. Damn it, as it will definitely happen this year. I have to call TBS, and we have to make some plan to how to get you out.
Oh, my big brother! You got to call my big brother. Okay, well, we'll see.
Well, he's your big brother, but now that you're grabbing the limits, I mean, that can quickly change.
Yeah. Well, you know.
He lives close by from me. Just 6
hours.
Oh,
right. Yeah, he's in Europe now, so. Yeah.
And yeah, good luck in your MH3. I hope
it started out rough so far. Let's just say we had the early access event, but I was just trying things for science. Okay, so don't get too mad when you see me do poorly in these videos. That's going to be coming up. But once, because these don't count, right? For the, yeah. See, this is where I get to mess around. Okay, and then I can just go pure Abzan Cheons once MH3 comes out.
So if you have 5 minutes, can you tell me what you were drafting in those MH3 decks? Maybe people will get a taster of the new format.
I mean, I try to do everything. I initially started out trying to draft Eldrazi. I basically forced it, but clearly everybody else wanted to force Eldrazi. That's the thing everybody wants to play, right? So my deck was just awful. Then I tried to draft the mid-range black-white strategy, which got easily outclassed by said big Eldrazi. And then I tried to draft the energy deck, which I also got thrashed with because I just had way too many payoff cards and not enough things that affect the board, right? I just didn't have enough cabs in my in my deck, so I just had a board of just 4 artifacts that did cool things but didn't actually do anything with the board. So that was kind of rough. But This was all part of the learning process to set me up for the actual event. And then I had a lot of success with a red-green Eldrazi deck because the 4-mana Chrysalis, that is the mythic common of the set. Okay, I'm saying this now. That is the mythic common of the set. That card is completely unreasonable. They're better in multiples. Do not pass them if you can help it, especially if you're those 2 colors.
Yeah, I had 4 in my deck. It was good.
Yeah, I bet.
The deck was not that powerful, but 4 Chrysalis makes a lot of difference.
You just play one on turn 4 and turn 5, and you have 2 6/7s in play. And you got 4 mana.
That happened.
Yeah. I mean, what if I could tell you, you get to play a 4-mana, 4/5 creature with reach that puts 2 colorless lotus petals into play. Yeah. Would you play that one? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'll see you next week, and probably we're going to start speculating or making a primer about Modern Horizons without early data, probably just yet. But or maybe I'll do the episode with the early data next week already. When is it released on Arena?
Tuesday, I believe. Yeah.
So maybe I can do the Thursday episode and have the first 2 days of data so people can get the very unrelative and speculative data on which they will base their future.
With a total of 1,000 matches.
Yeah. No, day 2, you get around 300,000 games in.
There's that many people on 17 lands that give you that data.
And there's that many games in the first 2 days. The problem is that there are 300,000 rubbish data points because no one knows what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's still kind of fun. And then you get to make a format update, right? A couple weeks later. See?
That's exactly what I do. But the problem is that so many people will take the first 3 days of the format and then in stone scribe in their head that that's how the format looks like and don't update that information ever again.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: the Chrysalis is going to be good at the end of the set too.
You heard it. You heard it from me first. Very highly after week 2.
Exactly.
Okay. So goodbye to you all. Thank you, Paul, and that's it.